Hi, my name is Surya, and today I'm going to make socks on my Passap Duomatic 80.
Okay, make sure your racking handle is up.
The racking handle indicator is just to the left of 0.
You'll need your orange strippers to start. I've got my front and back lock set to N, and I've got my stitch size on the front and back lock set to 1.5. My row counter is at 0.
Okay, to make these socks, we need to do the tubular cast on. And I am going to pull up 72 needles on both the front and the back bed. I'm using Knit Picks Chroma fingering yarn. The instructions for these socks tell you to use to pull up 60 needles, and but that's for like a size 5 or 6 shoe, it says. So since that's not my reality, I am going to pull up more needles, and it seemed to come out the right size when I made the first sock. So you know, you can figure out however many needles you need for your own, but you know, for a size 10, that seemed about right. Came out good. So on the back bed, I'm going to pull up the same number of needles, and the racking handle is such that the needles should be facing each other perfectly. They should be head to head. Okay, and then you want to pull down and out of work, starting from the second needle on the front bed. You're going to leave the first needle up, and then you're going to pull every other needle down and out of work. And then on the back bed, starting with the first needle, you're going to pull every other needle down and out of work. Okay, next you're going to make sure your edge springs are in place and that your latch hooks are closed on those edge springs on the edge there. There we go. I like to use the orange tool to help close the latches on the needles. Helps them close a little faster and easier.
Okay, so your needles should be staggered when you're finished with this, with the first needle on your left-hand side on the front bed up in working position, and the first needle on your left-hand side on the back bed down and out of working position. So just take a second look and make sure that your needles are not going to butt into each other when you go to knit your row.
Okay, so we've got yarn in our lock. That's important. You don't want to have the unpleasant surprise of your knitting being scrapped off when you don't want it to be scrapped off. And so we've got yarn in there, and our stitch size 1.5, so we'll knit our first row. And then we look and it says lock CX CX, so we're going to change our lock to CX on both sides. So this is on C and X, and C and X. And then it says set stitch size to approximately 3/4 of the stitch size used for the main knitting. So I've been choosing 2 3/4 since my main knitting stitch size is 3 3/4. And so I've got that on 2 3/4 now. And then it says to knit 2 rows with CX CX. Okay, And I've got tricky yarn. Watch back here. If the yarn starts twirling and making tangles, you don't want tangles to come up into your tension rods, because that can cause your carriage to lock up right in the middle of the row. Okay, so next we have the lock on N and N again. And it says stitch size as for main knitting. So I'll look at my sock pattern, and the main knitting stitch size is 3 3/4, and so we're going to knit 1 row, and that should finish the cast on. Check again because I was talking. N and N, yep, 3 3/4. Nope, see, I didn't change that one. So there, now we have our stitch size 3 3/4. Okay, so our cast on is complete, and next we'll start knitting our rib. Okay, so the recipe I'm using for this sock is from the Passap instruction manual, and it's a really simple, easy sock to make. The instructions are a little weird the way they wrote them in a couple of places, but I worked that out, and I just made notes on the side for what I need to do. So now that we've done our cast on, I can go ahead and just continue knitting rows, which will make my ribbed cuff. Let's see, this says to knit 48 rows. I'm just going to do 40 rows. That's what I did on my other sock, so I'm going to match it. Oh, and I'm going to put my row counter on, well, number 1, because I just knit 1 row. And I'm going to stop every now and then because my yarn, this particular yarn likes to tangle. So I check behind my machine to make sure it's not tangling. And this part of it is. So I will see you in 40 rows. Okay, so I finished with my first set of rows, which was my leg section, and or actually, I'm sorry, my rib cuff, and now we're going to knit the leg. And before I knit the leg, I have to take this ribbing off on waste yarn, and the instructions tell you to use a decker comb to do all these transfers, but I don't have one of those. I ordered one. It's coming soon, and they're easier to do this sock with. If you have the decker comb, use it. If you don't, you can do it on waste yarn like I'm going to do right now. It's just a little bit fussier, but I'll show you how to do it. Okay, before I do anything, I need to transfer all these stitches that are on the front bed to the back bed. So I need to bring up all the needles on the back bed that were out of work. And then all the stitches on the front bed, I'm just going to transfer them over to the back bed right now. So I use my double bodkin tool. And just flip those over to the other side, to the other bed. And I'm just going to transfer these all the way across the bed till I get to the other end. Okay, so here's a close-up of the transferring. Okay, so I've transferred my stitches from front bed to the back bed, and I want to make sure that all these needles on the front are out of work. And then next I want to hang some weights on this ribbing, and they're pretty much just going to stay there for the rest of the sock. I'll move them around here and there, and when I do the heel I move them up some. So the weights will just make things a little more secure, keep the knitting from popping off when you don't want it to. There we go. And next, what I need to do is I need to knit some waste yarn onto here. But before I knit the waste yarn on, I need to mark the center 2 stitches, and I like to mark the edge stitches as well. So I take some contrasting yarn and just run it through each of those edge stitches and through the center stitch so that they're marked, and they'll be easier, it'll make it a lot easier to rehang this when it comes time to resew. Okay, now to knit the waste yarn on here, we have to act like we're going to be knitting our leg section already. So that means that we need to take out our black strip or our orange strippers and put in our black strippers. And since we're only knitting on the back bed, we want to shut off our front lock here, so we're going to put it on GX. I'm going to put my row counter to 0. And then the back bed I'm going to put on 5 1/4, because that's the stitch length that I'm going to knit the leg at anyways. So I've got that on knit. And I'm ready to knit my 20 rows of waste yarn. The reason I'm knitting 20 rows, it's kind of a lot of rows of waste yarn, is because when you rehang these stitches, the waste yarn is going to get kind of stretched and abused a little bit. So I want to be sure there's enough on there so it doesn't unravel too far.